Life rarely announces when it is about to change you. It often arrives quietly, disguised as an ordinary moment, before unfolding into something that reshapes your entire world. That is what made this story resonate so deeply. One moment, viewers tuned in expecting the familiar warmth and humor they had known for years. The next, they were witnessing something far more intimate. A woman struggling to hold back tears beside the man she loves, as the weight of life-altering health news settled between them. Kelly Ripa's emotion was not performative, not polished, but unmistakably real. Millions watching understood instinctively that this was not television as usual. It was life breaking through the screen, reminding us how quickly certainty can dissolve and how fragile even the strongest foundations can be. Seeing Mark beyond the spotlight. For decades, Mark Consuelos has existed in the public imagination as a symbol of strength and charisma. He is the confident presence, the steady partner, the man who seems unshakable. Yet beyond the lights and applause is someone far more familiar and relatable. A husband, a father, a man who carries responsibilities and fears that never make it onto a teleprompter. That contrast is what made this moment so jarring. The idea that someone who appears so solid could suddenly be confronted with vulnerability forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Strength does not make us immune. It often masks the quiet battles being fought beneath the surface, unseen and unspoken, until they can no longer be ignored. When whispers become reality. Before any official acknowledgement, there are always whispers. A pause in routine, a look exchanged off camera, a sense that something is different, even if no one says it out loud. Those early signs invite speculation, but they also reveal how deeply people care. When confirmation finally arrives, it does not feel like news so much as a reckoning. The family did not share details, nor did they need to. What mattered was the clarity that this was serious, life-altering, and real. In that moment, curiosity gave way to concern. The narrative shifted from rumor to empathy, and the audience was reminded that behind every headline is a human life navigating uncertainty. The weight of a public reality. There is something uniquely heavy about receiving difficult news while living in the public eye. Privacy becomes porous. Emotions that should be held close are suddenly shared with millions. Kelly and Mark did not choose that exposure, yet they met it with honesty rather than retreat. The cameras did not capture a performance. They captured a pause, a breath, a moment where composure slipped and humanity stepped forward. That vulnerability resonated because it was not rehearsed. It was what happens when reality interrupts routine and demands to be acknowledged, regardless of who is watching. Tears as a language of love. Kelly Ripa's tears were not a sign of weakness. They were a reflection of love in its most unguarded form. When someone you have built a life with faces uncertainty, the future suddenly feels fragile, as though it could shatter with one wrong movement. Her emotion spoke to that fear, to the instinctive grief for the life you thought was guaranteed, and the courage required to face what comes next. Viewers did not see a television host struggling. They saw a partner processing the possibility of change, loss, and resilience all at once. It was a moment of honesty that words alone could never have conveyed. The meaning of a life-altering diagnosis. A diagnosis does not have to be explained in detail to be understood. The phrase life-altering carries enough weight on its own. It suggests a journey filled with uncertainty, adaptation, and moments that demand patience and courage. Rather than speculating about specifics, what matters is the shared human experience of receiving news that redraws the map of your future. Suddenly, plans are tentative. Time feels different. The present becomes more urgent. For Mark, this moment likely required confronting limitations he had never had to consider before. For Kelly, it meant learning how to support someone she loves while managing her own fear. Walking through the unknown. Together, no one navigates such moments alone, even when the path feels isolating. A shared journey through uncertainty reshapes a relationship in profound ways. It tests communication, patience, and endurance. It also reveals depths of connection that everyday life rarely demands. For Mark and Kelly, this chapter became less about individual strength and more about partnership. The quiet moments, the unspoken understanding, the shared resolve to face each day as it comes. These are the places where love becomes less about grand gestures and more about showing up again and again, even when the future feels unclear. A broadcast that felt different. When the story reached the screen, something shifted. The familiar rhythm of morning television softened. Humor gave way to sincerity. The space between words grew heavier. Kelly's voice carried the weight of someone balancing professionalism with raw emotion. Viewers sensed that they were witnessing something rare, not a carefully curated narrative, but a moment of truth. The broadcast did not offer dramatic revelations or medical specifics. Instead, it offered presence, and that, perhaps, was more powerful than any explanation could have been. Redefining what strength looks like. In public life, strength is often portrayed as invulnerability, as the ability to keep moving without pause, to never let cracks show. But this moment challenged that definition entirely. Mark and Kelly revealed that strength can also mean stopping. It can mean acknowledging fear. It can mean choosing honesty over image. Their story suggested that real resilience is not about pretending nothing hurts, but about continuing forward, even when it does. That message resonated far beyond their own experience, touching anyone who has ever felt pressured to appear fine when they were anything but. Turning fear into awareness. One unexpected outcome of this moment was the ripple effect it created. Viewers were not just moved emotionally. Many were prompted to reflect on their own health, their own avoidance of difficult conversations or postponed checkups. By sharing their fear, Mark and Kelly transformed a private challenge into a public reminder. Awareness does not eliminate risk, but it empowers choice. It encourages people to listen to their bodies, to ask questions, to take uncertainty seriously rather than pushing it aside. In that sense, vulnerability became a form of quiet advocacy. The invisible work of caregiving Kelly spoke, implicitly and explicitly, to a reality many understand too well: the emotional labor of supporting someone through uncertainty. Caregiving is not just physical assistance, it is mental vigilance, emotional regulation, and the constant balancing act between hope and realism. It means being strong when you are exhausted and optimistic when you are afraid. Her openness gave voice to that invisible work, validating countless partners who carry similar burdens quietly, often without recognition. A shift toward healing. As time moved forward, the focus began to change. The question was no longer only, what is happening, but how do we move through it? Healing, in any form, is rarely linear. It involves adjustment, humility, and learning to accept help. Mark spoke candidly about the challenge of redefining himself in the face of physical or emotional limitations. That honesty mattered. It challenged cultural expectations around masculinity and independence, offering permission for others to acknowledge their own need for support. The emotional and spiritual reckoning behind the scenes, the experience reshaped their inner world. Moments of silence took on new meaning. Time together felt more intentional. Priorities shifted, not because they were forced to, but because clarity emerged. When certainty disappears, what remains becomes more precious. Their story reflected a deeper understanding that life is not measured by productivity or performance, but by connection, presence, and shared resilience. When honesty softens the spotlight, the media, often quick to sensationalize, responded differently this time. There was little room for distortion when the truth was shared so plainly. Honesty has a way of disarming speculation. By standing in the light without pretense, Mark and Kelly changed the tone of the conversation. The story became less about crisis and more about courage, less about fear and more about how people show up for one another when it matters most. A legacy of vulnerable strength. What does it take to remain united when life becomes uncertain? This chapter of their story offers a quiet answer. It takes honesty. It takes the courage to admit fear without letting it define you. It takes love that is willing to adapt rather than resist change. Mark and Kelly's experience reminds us that being unbreakable is a myth. Real strength lives in the willingness to be changed by hardship and still choose hope. As they continue forward, they do so not as symbols of perfection, but as examples of resilience. And in that truth, many find their own reflection and their own reason to believe that uncertainty does not have to mean defeat.